Mississippian Christian Andreacchio, happy, fun-loving, with a seemingly bright future ahead, found with a bullet hole in his head, suicide or murder, you decide. Welcome to Crimes Among Us. Hailing from landlocked Meridian, Mississippi, Christian always dreamed of a life working on the water, and as soon as he turned 18, he would make this dream come true. He would start working on a tugboat. Now, he was making really, really good money, especially for someone with no college education, but he just had that drive to succeed and do something that he loved to do. Christian let it be known that he wanted to become the youngest towboat captain at Magnolia Marine, and when he set his mind to something, nothing and no one could stand in his way. Christian could be described as fun-loving, life of the party, never meets a stranger. Christian was a huge flirt. He loved the girls. He was a social butterfly with tons of friends. Then Christian's family would get concerned when he got a new love interest in his life. 17-year-old Whitley Goodman. Christian's mother would describe her as she seemed so sweet, cute little blonde girl that presented so well that the family allowed her to move into the house. Allegedly, Whitley would describe to his family that she had a very chaotic childhood, one that Christian's mother believes that he wanted to save her from. After staying with them around 1 month with Christian, working and taking care of her, basically giving her the Southern housewife treatment, things started to digress. Things went downhill. Christian's parents told him she could no longer stay. Afraid that her reputation did more than it preceded. Christian moved into an apartment with his older brother Josh, who also worked long 30-day hitches on the tugboat. Whitley needed somewhere to stay. Josh would accept help with rent from his brother Christian. So in their eyes, this was the perfect fit. Now, reportedly, whenever Christian would be gone out on the tugboat, not only did he let her stay there rent-free, he let her just drive his BMW all around, but then one day he would have an accident on the tugboat. Christian would be okay. However, Whitley allegedly became extremely interested in what would happen if Christian died. At a very young age, she was very concerned what would happen and who would take care of her. Christian then goes to his parents to seek advice about a life insurance policy, and they quickly shut it down, telling him that he should not name Whitley as his beneficiary. Now, allegedly, text messages were sent from Whitley to Christian saying, "Hey, I may be pregnant." And then a couple of days later, she said, "It's a false call. But what would you do? Who would take care of me? Who would take care of our baby if you died? Because you know my mother would not." All right, so working on a tugboat is a very lucrative paid job. However, with great reward comes great risk. So a lot of people have a life insurance policy. So Christian's mother believes that some type of way Whitley found out that his ex-girlfriend had a life insurance policy on him at his job, and she was not very happy about this. She did not like it at all. With long spells out across the Mississippi River, Christian started having his doubts about Whitley that could be described as a lot of conflict in their relationship. While on the tugboat, Christian would receive several phone calls from his friend, Dylan Swearingen, telling him that Whitley's driving his BMW around. They know that they have problems. She's doing a lot of stuff, just basically telling him a bunch of negative stuff that got him amped up. And he starts telling his tugboat captain he wants to go home. He's about to kick this girl out of his apartment. On February the 25th, Dylan's captain would give him permission to go home. Dylan would pick him up and drive him all the way from New Orleans to Meridian. Now this is when the story takes a turn into possible murder. 6 hours after Christian was dropped off, his dad receives a phone call from his dad while he was eating at the restaurant that he needed to come home now. Something had happened to one of his kids. Christian's parents immediately broke down. They said, "It can't be Christian. We just talked to him this morning and everything was fine." When they got home, the police showed up holding a driver's license. The police officer hands Christian's parents his driver's license, confirming that the deceased victim is Christian Andreacchio. The realization starts to set in that Christian is gone. Questions start to arise. Suspicious 911 call by his friend Dylan Swearingen. A bungled crime scene investigation, leaving us with the question, why would someone who had everything to lose his life in such a manner?
Ma'am, we got a suicide. You got a suicide? Yes, ma'am. Okay, what's your address? The Woodland Apartments. Woodland Apartments? What apartment number? 801. Apartment 801? Yes, ma'am, you said a BMW at 671. Alright, who is it, sir? Christian Andreacchio. Christian Andreacchio? Yeah. Okay, and you said he committed suicide? Yes, ma'am.
So immediately this phone call raises red flags to me. Why would someone immediately, when they call 911, paint the narrative in the operator's head that it is a suicide? And I mean, you're strong with this. Nobody can change your mind at this point. She says, so this is a suicide. Yes, ma'am. This is a suicide. He took his life. I mean, to me, something about that is very off. And when you get that off feeling, there's usually something wrong. When questioned by police, Dylan would tell them that Whitley and Christian had been arguing that afternoon. He alleges that Christian pulled out a gun, pointed it at his own head, and asked Whitley, "Do you love me?" So you're telling me something this traumatic happens with one of your friends, you don't call his parents, you don't do anything, you just take this as a he'll be all right type of situation? Whitley's statement that was given at the exact same time, they asked her, had Christian ever talked about hurting himself? And she said, I don't think so. Now, wouldn't that stand out to you if this event had just happened and all of a sudden this person took their own life, but to you, you don't think he's ever talked about it? Just seems suspicious to me. Meridian Police Department performed gunshot residue tests on both Christian and Whitley's hands. Allegedly, both those tests returned positive. However, Meridian Police Department did not investigate into that any further. Meridian police officers arrived at apartment 801 at approximately 5:05 p.m. And a measly 38 minutes later, they were pretty much done. And by 6:30, they were already on their way over to the Andreacchio's parents' house to tell them that their son had committed suicide. Allegedly, once Chief Lee entered Christian's apartment, he told his deputies to shut it down. This is a suicide. Allegedly, 1 month later, Christian's mom, Ray, went to the police chief and he said, listen, this was a suicide. I'm not going to investigate any further, point blank, period. It was a suicide. According to the Andreacchio's attorney, Dylan and Christian arrived at his apartment that morning at 11:30 a.m. About 1 hour later, Dylan is seen on bank security camera footage trying to remove all of Christian's money. The police questioned Dylan and asked why would he have done that. Dylan says, well, because Christian had told him on their way back to Meridian coming from Louisiana that he wanted him to have all of his money. Just all of a sudden, he wanted him to have every bit of his money. Unfortunately for Dylan's pockets, Christian allegedly must have forgotten to give him his personal identification number, so he had no way of accessing the money. After Dylan got finished running those important errands and receiving those unsuccessful funds, he gets back to the apartment around 4 p.m. Dylan claims that Whitley was asleep and Christian was nowhere to be seen. He says he then goes upstairs and knocks on the bathroom door, and that's when he finds Christian slumped over the bathtub. Some reports say when Dylan made his initial 911 call that he saw blood splatter on the stairs when blood should have not been outside the bathroom. The gun's positioning was very peculiar, to say the least. It was wedged in between his left thigh and the bathtub, implying that he somehow shot himself in the right side of the head, then snugly placed his gun between his left thigh and the bathtub. Now, take this into account. I don't know if you ever fired a handgun, but it is very loud. He said when he arrived there, Whitley was asleep. When she was asked by investigators what she was doing, she said she slept right through the gunshot. She never heard it. Whitley Goodman warned police right before her gunshot residue test that her results would be positive. She had been conveniently shooting a gun with her friend Matthew Miller the night before. So it makes me think she had to inconveniently not wash her hands, unhygienically not take a bath from 8, well maybe even 12 hours. Which poses another question: how did Dylan get gunshot residue on his hands if he never entered the bathroom? Despite all of this, friends and lovers, Dylan and Whitley have never been arrested or charged in connection to the death of Christian. Christian's family went to his apartment to collect evidence because the police did not, says attorney Cynthia Spiegens. Allegedly, a bloody knife and a bloody shirt was found in his apartment. The bloody shirt was behind the commode. This was given to the police officers, and some kind of way this evidence disappeared, implying that Christian, after a bullet hole to his brain, may have changed his shirt. Christian's family, desperate to unveil the truth of their son's death, turns to Dr. Jonathan Arden, a world-renowned forensic pathologist who worked on Washington, D.C.'s anthrax attacks and the D.C. snipers. From the start, Dr. Arden said he had a feeling that there was something not right about the death of Christian. Dr. Arden was extremely bothered that the gun was wedged between his upper left thigh and the outside of the tub. The entrance gunshot in the right side of his temple. Once he receives the gunshot, pow! He's unconscious, leaving him with no purposeful muscular activity. If you're leaned over how Christian was and you fire a weapon into the right side of your head, where's the recoil? The gun should have been close to his hand or certainly on the same side of it, which it was not. The arm and body should have collapsed in a heap. And then there's the gun itself, a .45 caliber semi-automatic, high-powered, extremely loud pistol. The beauty of the functionality of a semi-automatic pistol: you pull trigger, gun fires, gun reloads, voila, you're ready to fire again. When the gun was found, the hammer was forward or decocked, making zero sense. If you had just shot yourself, the gun should have been ready to shoot again. Someone had to do it. Impossible with a bullet hole in your brain, says attorney Cynthia Spiegens. Then there's the magic bullet mystery. The bullet itself was very problematic, says Dr. Arden. The bullet has not only blood, but a foreign material consistent with wallboard in the deformed nose of the bullet, telling that the bullet had a strike against wallboard. Crime scene photos show it seems to be a bullet hole in the wall, but it's behind Christian's body. In order for the bullet that killed Christian to go through his head and strike the wall behind him, it would have had to ricochet madly throughout the room, said Dr. Arden. He also analyzed autopsy photos, which he says reveals even more contradictions. The people that discovered Christian said he had only been there for a short period of time. However, his body had firmly developed rigor mortis, which is inconsistent with what they told authorities. This is what we call a staged scene. Somebody has staged the elements of the death scene to try to create the impression that this was a suicide. Unfortunately, whoever did this, they got it horribly wrong, says Dr. Arden. If Dr. Arden is right, then why has the Meridian Police Department not investigated Christian's death as a homicide? This case simply has not been investigated, says attorney Cynthia Spiegens. She quotes, "I am not a law enforcement officer, and the fact that the Andreacchios had to hire me is quite offensive to me. If Christian was murdered, who stood to gain?" The Andreacchios dug deeper into the day he died, and they found what might be the most damaging evidence yet. The Andreacchios have spent thousands of their own hard-earned money trying to investigate the death of their son, determined to prove that Christian's death was murder, not suicide. A closer look at Whitley's actions that day raises even more questions. Whitley Goodman allegedly had Christian's phone in her purse on the day of his death. Whitley would lie repeatedly, saying she didn't have the phone, she did not know where it was. Meridian police officers finally said no one is leaving this police station until we have the phone, and she pulls it out of her purse. Not at all trying to be accusatory, but what were you hiding and what did you delete? Why tamper with evidence if this was merely a suicide? And while we're sitting in class, if an extremely loud .45 caliber pistol shot in the forest, does it make a sound? 7 calls were made from Christian's phone to Matt Miller, the guy that Whitley says she was shooting guns with the night before, that caused the GSR to be on her hands. Christian's family alleges that Christian was coming home that day to confront Whitley about Matt Miller. So why pick up the phone to call Matt, out of all people, right before you pulled the trigger? Did Christian have possession of his phone, or was it already in someone's purse? Allegedly, Whitley thought that Christian had taken out a life insurance policy that she was the beneficiary of. Allegedly, apparently, Dylan did also, as he went to speak with Christian's grandfather about it. saying that Whitley's grandmother had sent him over to find out when the insurance would be paying out. Supposedly needed a car since they no longer had Christians. And then there's the case of the so-called arrest warrants for Dylan and Whitley that were never activated. Were these just used as some tactic to shut up Christian's parents? They've done all this with this case. We've got national experts saying this is a staged suicide, this is a homicide, said Todd Andreacchio. What else have they done with other cases? If they'll do that with this, with us fighting so hard, what have they done that no one's called them on? We need help around here, I believe.